This is going to be a heavy, adult-themed episode of Bad Machines, so if you've got children in the room, I suggest you use parental restraint and consideration before allowing them to continue to listen to the rest of the podcast, because what we're going to discuss is something I was hoping to avoid, which was this whole George Floyd incident. Now, quite frankly, I had no interest in getting involved in this, mainly because what I heard initially on the radio were multiple reports of how George Floyd consistently said that he couldn't breathe. And much like my opinion in the Eric Garner incident in New York City a few years back, and with consideration of many years in the martial arts and professional security, if you could say you can't breathe, you can breathe. And if you could say you can't breathe for several minutes, you can more than breathe. There's a difference between not being able to breathe and finding a shortness of breath, or finding a difficulty in breathing. Considerable difference. Nonetheless, 48 hours ago, after avoiding pretty much a week of the George Floyd news, deleting every reference to it I see on my social media sites, avoiding it as much as possible, I came across a video which actually detailed the arrest where George Floyd and two other adult suspects are removed from a motor vehicle, handcuffed, placed against the wall. George Floyd is. The other two are not. 4 minutes into it, the officer who's put Mr. Floyd in handcuffs looks at the security camera on the side of the store, presumably, and then he and a bunch of other officers walk Mr. Floyd down the block, presumably to the person who claimed initially that he wrote a bad check, and then the story is now that it was a counterfeit $20 bill. Okay. So that was interesting. You didn't see any type of resistance. You could see that Mr. Floyd is probably fucked up on something. Probably an alcoholic, maybe a crackhead, maybe an oxyhead. I don't know. I'm casting aspersions, certainly, but you could see that Mr. Floyd is clearly not in a sober condition when he is pulled over. And you see him brought down the block. Then curiosity got the better of me one more time, and I looked for the video where we see this individual get killed. And what I see now are different cops holding this individual down, which makes no sense. There is a gap between videotapes. I'm not sure why that is. Actually, I am sure why that is. It's multiple sources coming forward with these different tapes. And then we watch a 7-minute and 22-second video, which appears to be unedited except for the addition of a dramatic score underneath, where we see these officers holding Mr. Floyd on the ground. Officer Derek Chauvin with his knee placed against his neck. His other knee, if you notice, is actually on the ground, which means he can't really be exerting that much force on the forward knee. It's just physics, guys. It's just how your knee works. And again, you'll hear Mr. Floyd say multiple times that he can't breathe for several minutes, which again indicates that he can breathe. He actually says this for about 3 minutes and 46 seconds before he doesn't say anything anymore. What I'm looking at here, and again, I like to look at things from a different perspective than everyone else is quick to presume, and I'm looking at this like it's the Sunday night movie starring Columbo this weekend. And Columbo is looking at the same thing we're all looking at. And what he is watching appears very much to be a show, a presentation. We are deliberately looking exclusively at Officer Chauvin and his non-lethal application of a knee on the back of Mr. Floyd's neck. But what we don't see are the three other men who are holding bodily Mr. Floyd to the ground. And what these guys are doing, I really don't know. What I also find interesting is, within 19 seconds of the initial audio, you have the Asian gentleman, this Asian police officer, ask, "What are you on?" And then at a minute change into it, he mentions drugs. And then again at 5 minutes and 51 seconds, he mentions drugs again. Like he's sort of confident that Mr. Floyd has some sort of drug issue going on, which I find a little weird, especially considering the rest of the situation, especially considering the fervor of the crowd that is actually asking this officer and other officers to pay attention to the now unconscious man 4 minutes into the video. His body language isn't a body language of someone who was actually surprised something is occurring with such a degree of severity, let's say. It's almost like he expects it. And again, we're only looking at the one officer whose left hand stays in his pocket the entire time he's pressing his knee down on the back of Mr. Floyd's neck. Now you'll also see Mr. Floyd turn his head and reposition his face while he's breathing before he stops breathing. And then we find out that Mr. Floyd and Officer Javin work together at the El Nuevo Rancho restaurant nightclub for close to 17 years. So these gentlemen knew each other. These gentlemen were not a unknown quantity. Again, I step back, I try and look at this and look to what I actually see, not to what I'm being told. And what I see is maybe a bunch of cops who were looking for the guy who happened to have the counterfeit money that was made possibly somewhere in a nightclub or passed in a nightclub and had gone missing, and how suddenly appears on the street. It would suggest a lot of things. Again, I'm not really saying nothing. I'm just speculating on the hypotenuse. Or would that be speculating on the hypothesis? Yeah, I like to have fun with English. So I see something completely different than what we're being sold. I see maybe some dirty guys who are running all the action in town. Running all the action. The girls, the dope, the phony money. Who knows what else is going on? Political bribery, this, that, the other thing. Yeah, just like a detective. Just like Columbo would look at it. I mean, the officers were all different races, right? One was Hispanic, one was Arabic, one was Asian, one was Caucasian. The victim was an American Negro. Again, the gentleman who died and one of the officers definitely knew each other. And who's to say the rest of them didn't know each other? These men were acting in a way that suggested to me these guys had a lot to lose if Mr. Floyd were able to talk. A lot to lose. So this is what I'm wondering. I'm wondering why we see different cops in different videos. I'm wondering why the victim and one of the officers had a relationship prior to this. I wonder why it looks like it's an undercover police officer who's smashing the windows at AutoZone. Imagine that, you smash up the AutoZone, if you got any type of shady business going on there, well, that's all destroyed. And then the police department itself is all destroyed. So there goes all your evidence. Pretty interesting. Again, I really don't know much. I'm just looking at things a little differently than maybe they want us to look at it. These riots that you see, these engineered riots that are paid for by billionaire henchmen. We know who they are. Georgie Schwartz, a.k.a. Georgie Soros. We see how Corona's no longer the big deal. Now riots are race riots, engineered race riots. Well, that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing an engineered crime meant to take advantage of an explosive political situation. And I see the townsfolk inadvertently burning down all the evidence like dummies. That's all. I don't really care about the race right now. The race is involved in the rioters. Nope. I'm just looking at what I see, and what I see is something glaringly obvious. We got dirty cops, a man on the street who knew too much, who had the sticky fingers, needed to be taken care of. They do it in a very public fashion. While the one cop is holding him down by the neck, the other cops could be injecting him with heroin, cocaine, or something as simple as insulin, which would give you a death with the appearance of a heart attack. Yeah, something as simple as insulin. Don't know what's happening or what's going on in America, but something is definitely happening and going on in America. Keep your guard up. Keep your eyes open.
Jesus, Tom, I was just speculating about a hypothesis. I know I don't know nothing. It's just a damn mess, is all.